Welcome to the Explainer. So let's talk about something that's, well, it's a huge deal for pretty much any modern company. Your systems are making thousands of decisions every single minute. How on earth do you govern that?
All right, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll get into the real risks of letting these decisions run wild. Then we'll talk about the solution, building what's called a monitoring layer. We'll dig into this special database, an audit datamart, figure out how to set the rules, and then pull it all together to show you how you can actually, trust your analytics.
Right, so Section 1, the risks. I mean, it's amazing, right? We've got these systems cranking out thousands of decisions a minute. That's some serious power. But with great power, what's the catch? What's the potential downside here?
And that really gets to the heart of the matter, doesn't it? We've automated all these decisions, but how do we actually control them? How do we know they're not just fast, but that they're also right? And maybe even more importantly, how do we build the controls to prove it?
It's really a classic trade-off. On the one hand, the promise of automation is just incredible. We're talking superior efficiency, decisions happening 24/7, no geographical limits. But on the other side of that coin, there is the peril. The risk of mistakes, abuse, heck, even just incompetence can lead to absolutely massive losses if it's left unchecked.
And look, this isn't just some theoretical what-if scenario. The consequences are very, very real. History is unfortunately littered with examples. Things like rogue trader syndromes, the infamous flash crash back in 2010. These events show what happens when automated systems don't have proper governance. They can amplify everything from outright deception to just, sheer stupidity, with truly devastating results. Okay, so if those are the risks, it begs the question, what's the solution? How do we even begin to build a safety net for our analytics to protect ourselves from ourselves?
The answer is something called an audit and control framework. Now, don't let the name scare you. Really, you can just think of it as a dedicated monitoring layer. It's a system whose entire job is to sit on top of your automated processes and just watch. It measures and controls every single decision your analytics are making.
And here's a fantastic way to think about it. Imagine this framework is like a set of circuit breakers for your business. Just like in your house. If something starts to go wrong, if a pattern of decisions looks off or crosses a line you've set, click, the circuit breaker trips. It stops the automation in its tracks before any real damage can be done.
So how does this monitoring layer actually work? Well, it's basically a continuous loop. Check this out. First, some event happens in your business. Say someone applies for a loan. Then, your analytics model makes an automated decision. Right at that moment, the monitoring layer jumps in and captures all the key metadata about that decision. Finally, it records everything in a special database called an audit datamart. Every single decision becomes traceable.
Okay, so that last step mentions something called an audit datamart. That sounds pretty important. So what exactly is that, and what does it look like under the hood?
All right, at its very core, the audit datamart is a database built around what we call a fact table. Now, for anyone out there with a data warehousing background, this structure is going to feel really familiar. Think of this table as the ultimate logbook. It records the who, what, where, and when for every decision, the date, the time, which specific strategy and model were used, and of course, the final outcome, like accept or reject.
But just the facts aren't enough, right? We need context. And that's where dimension tables come in. We link that central fact table out to these other tables that give us all the crucial details. For example, which version of the model was running at that exact moment? What were the specific parameters of the strategy being used? This is how you build the complete, totally auditable picture of what happened.
Okay, the last pieces of the puzzle are the control tables. You've got your threshold table and your alert table. This is where the control part of the framework really comes to life. The threshold table is where we store our circuit breaker rules. For example, a rule might be no more than 100 high-risk loan approvals per hour. If that rule gets broken, bam, a record is instantly created in the alert table, flagging it for immediate human review.
So this is great. We've got the whole structure built to store the rules. But that leads to the next big question, right? How do we actually come up with the right controls? Where do these thresholds and rules even come from?
Well, it turns out there are basically three main ways you can go about this. First, you can use best practices from your industry. Think about the circuit breakers stock exchanges put in place after the flash crash. Second, you can rely on your own internal experts. You take the knowledge from a seasoned loan officer and turn their rules of thumb into actual code. And third, you can use an analytical approach.
digging into your own historical data to find the patterns that scream risk.
And to make any of these controls actually work, we have to make them concrete by setting a specific threshold. This is what turns a general idea or a principle into a hard, automated rule. It's the if-then logic that powers our circuit breaker. So let's take a bank, for instance. Maybe they analyze all their historical loan data and find a clear tipping point. They discover that if their model predicts the probability of a default is anything greater than, say, 62%, the risk just isn't worth it. And boom, that number, 62%, becomes the threshold. Any application that comes in higher than that gets automatically rejected or sent to a human for a second look. It's simple, it's driven by data, and it is incredibly effective.
Okay, let's pull this all together. We have this complete framework, the monitoring layer, the audit data mart, and our carefully defined controls. How does all of this actually deliver the stability and trustworthiness that we were looking for from the very beginning?
Well, here's the payoff. This whole governance framework is what transforms your powerful, but let's face it, potentially volatile analytics models into stable, effective, and truly trustworthy business assets. It gives you stability by stopping those cascading failures. It ensures effectiveness because you're constantly monitoring performance. It creates trustworthiness through a crystal clear, transparent audit trail. And hey, as a bonus, it gives you all the data you need to constantly tune and improve your models over time.
And that really brings us to the final, most important takeaway here. Your systems are making thousands, maybe millions of decisions every single day. The real question is, can you trust them? Because implementing a governance framework like this, it isn't just a tech project. It's an absolute necessity for building and maintaining trust in your automated world. It's what lets you confidently answer yes to that question.
And that's a wrap on this explainer. I hope this look at governing automated decisions was helpful. If you found it valuable, do me a favor and share it with your colleagues. And of course, subscribe for more deep dives. Thanks for watching.